I'm Eric, and this is the art and science of healing chronic disease, where we focus on healing by aligning with nature. And I call it an art and a science because it's very important to learn the science, and then it's equally important to apply that science in a way that paints a picture of health for our personal situation. So if you've not watched videos 1 and 2, please go back and watch them before watching this video, which is now video number 3. And I'm calling this video Detailed Nutrition for Healing Chronic Disease. In video number 1, we talked about the main causes of chronic disease, including damage to the gut microbiome, damage to the cell mitochondria. In video number 2, we talked about the foundational nutritional components, which consisted largely of nutritional therapeutic ketosis. Now today, in this video, video number 3, we're going to talk about more details. We're going to start with a discussion of protein, fat, fiber, and I'm not including much on carbohydrates because on a nutritionally therapeutic ketogenic diet, we are specifically avoiding carbohydrates to help heal our gut microbiome, our cell mitochondria, and this is the base, the foundation of healing chronic disease. So I'd like to go ahead and get right into it, and we'll start with discussion on protein. So what is protein? Well, protein is a string of amino acids that's folded into a particular shape. So when we eat protein, the most important part is the distribution of amino acids. We need to get the correct amino acids in the correct dosage. And so this is what people talk about when they talk about quality protein. Quality protein is a protein that provides the amino acids in the correct proportion, the correct dosage that our human body requires. Now, some amino acids are essential amino acids, which means that the human body cannot make them. We must get them from food. And others are non-essential amino acids, which means that our human body can make them out of other building parts. So those we do not have to get from food. But we need to get these quality proteins so that we can have the right amino acids in the right distribution and the right dosage. If we're eating proteins only from something like, let's say, plants, then we're going to be very deficient in proteins, in amino acids like lysine, methionine, tryptophan, leucine. We will not have adequate amounts of those amino acids to construct our cells, to construct any proteins that are going to be necessary throughout our body. If we are deficient in just one amino acid, then we're not going to be able to make any proteins because pretty much every protein in the body requires all the amino acids, at least in a very, very small amount. So if just one of those amino acids is missing, we can't make the protein that's necessary for our cells to function. So proper amino acid distribution is very important. So what are good proteins to eat when we're focusing on healing chronic disease? Well, first of all, we want to focus on whole foods. So we'll start with that. And now let's talk about specific proteins from specific animals. Because in video number 2, we talked about eliminating grains, eliminating beans, eliminating sources of plant protein that are major contributors to chronic disease, to destruction of the gut lining, the epithelial layer, and other problems as well. Ruminant animals, that includes cows, sheep, and goats, are probably the best source of protein for healing chronic disease, and that's due to several reasons. So when we take a look at grass-fed ruminant animals, it's interesting to note that they're not actually eating the grass. They're consuming the grass, but then they have this, basically a large intestine called a rumen. And these ruminant animals use that large intestine as a fermenting chamber. And fermenting means that the bacteria are the ones who are actually eating that grass. And the bacteria are eating that grass and they're producing fat and proteins, which the cow then consumes. So the cow is basically eating the bacteria, it's eating the proteins and fat from the bacteria, and it's consuming the grass so that the bacteria can eat that grass. So it's an interesting distinction as to how cows, how goats, how sheep are acquiring their nutrients, and then that can transfer to us. One of the neat things about ruminant animals is because they have basically 4 stomachs, they're able to filter a lot of the toxins in plants that cause problems for humans that can contribute to chronic disease. So this is a very interesting distinction. So next on the list, I would include wild-caught seafood. So that might include fish, it might include shrimp, scallops, squid. There's several things we can include in wild-caught seafood, but it's very important to distinguish between wild-caught seafood and farm-raised seafood. I would not recommend consuming farm-raised seafood at all. And here are the reasons why. Number one, farm-raised seafood can contain a lot of lice, which is not good for humans. Number two, farm-raised seafood is typically fed corn, other grains, and those grains contribute to the construction of the cells of the fish. Then we consume that fish, so we end up getting the polyunsaturated fats, we end up getting the phytosterols that came from the grains that the fish were fed. Fish are not supposed to eat grains. The really, really small fish, like sardines, are supposed to eat plants like algae and such, and the larger fish are supposed to eat the smaller fish, and the really big fish are supposed to eat the medium-sized fish. So that's the way the process is supposed to go. Avoid farm-raised fish at all costs. Get yourself wild-caught fish, and you can get that in cans. Just check to make sure that the cans are safe cans that do not contain a lot of BPA's in the lining and other contaminants in the lining, that toxins that can cause problems and contribute to chronic disease. I eat a lot of sardines. Sardines are great, especially if you get the ones with the bones in them. They have a lot of calcium. They have a lot of protein. They have a lot of really, really good fats, like the EPA and DHA versions of omega-3 fatty acids. We'll talk a little bit more about omega-3 when we get to nutrients here in a few minutes. Next on the list, I would put pasture-raised monogastric animals. What does monogastric mean? Well, when I say monogastric, that's in comparison to ruminant animals. Ruminant animals, like as I said, have these 4 stomach chambers. There's a lot of fermenting that goes on in the upper gut on purpose because that's where it's supposed to happen in ruminant animals. Monogastric animals like chickens, like ducks, like pigs, their intestines are more like humans. It's pretty much a straight line. They have just one stomach. There's not a lot of fermenting that's supposed to be going on in the upper gut. Pasture raised is very, very important as opposed to raised fully on grains and soys and these food supplements that are given to monogastric animals. Monogastric animals do not filter out plant toxins as well as ruminant animals. So you really want to be careful of what the monogastric animals are fed that you're consuming. Best is to call the farms that you're going to buy your monogastric animals from. Ask them, what do you feed your chickens, ducks, and pigs? And then make sure that they are pasture raised as much as possible, because then they'll be eating the bugs, the insects that are wild in the pasture. They'll be fed food supplements as little as possible. And I would say the same goes for the next item on the list, which would be pasture-raised eggs. Eggs are a fantastic source of protein, also fat and vitamins and minerals that we'll talk about in a little bit. But just confirm, make sure that these are pasture-raised eggs, and it's best to call the farms, find out exactly what they're feeding these animals. Now, if you have a choice between grass-fed ruminants, I'm coming back to ruminants now, and grain-fed ruminants, and it comes down to money, or it comes down to what's available. Maybe you don't have access to grass-fed ruminants and you do have access to grain-fed. So if it comes down to a choice between grass-fed ruminants and pasture-raised monogastrics, I would actually ear towards the side of the grain-fed ruminants, because ruminants are so good at filtering out all the stuff that contributes to chronic disease for humans. Now, any of these animal proteins that you're consuming, you want to make sure that the farms you're buying them from do not use any antibiotics, because those antibiotics will transfer to you. And antibiotics kill the gut microbiome, which we talked about in videos 1 and 2. And you want to make sure you do everything possible to avoid killing your gut microbiome. In addition, glyphosate, which is a chemical in the product Roundup, which is used as an antibiotic on crops, that is an antibiotic. It's patented as an antibiotic. Most people think of it as a weed killer, but it is patented as an antibiotic. And antibiotics kill your gut microbiome. Avoid glyphosate at all costs, which means ask your farm if they're feeding the animals grains, beans, any soy products. Are they using organic? Are they using organic feed? The feed has to be free of antibiotics, has to be free of glyphosate. Now, I personally choose not to eat any animals that are raised on a CAFO. A CAFO is a concentrated animal feeding operation, and that basically means factory farming of animals. Animals that are raised in concrete buildings, on concrete floors with very small enclosures. I find that to be cruel towards animals, and I do everything I can to avoid eating animals raised in that environment. I have 3 principles that apply to my diet. One of them is to create a healthy body for myself and for helping others create healthy bodies. Number 2 is to foster a healthy planet by choosing foods that create a healthier planet for us, for all of us. And number 3 is to manifest happy animals. If we're going to consume animals, I like to have those animals live a happy life until it's time for them to be slaughtered, for us to consume them. I understand that everyone may not share the same ideals that I do, and I certainly respect that. And I understand that there's certain times when it's difficult to avoid factory farmed animals. For example, recently we went to visit my daughter for her birthday. We met at a restaurant halfway between her college and our house, and it was an Olive Garden. I ordered a steak because I'm trying to eat mostly carnivore for my personal health these days. And that steak probably came from an animal raised on a CAFO. That's the first time I've been out to dinner in probably 8 months. So I felt bad about it, but I did eat the steak, and I certainly understand and respect other people who may consume animals from a CAFO, but I try to avoid that at all costs. Now, how do you find these farms? So there is a website called the Weston A. Price Foundation. And if you don't know who Weston A. Price is, he was a marvelous contributor to dentistry, to science, to anthropology, to the way humans are supposed to eat. He did tremendous research back in the 1930s, and it was a really neat point in history, a neat point in time, because there were still a lot of indigenous tribes who were eating in their native ancestral ways that were still very, very prolific around the globe. And at the same time, cameras had been invented. So he was able to take the camera into those ancestral environments and photograph the structure of the human jaw, the structure of the dental arches, the bones, the way people looked. He was able to photograph the foods that they ate and the way that they processed these foods. So it was very, very interesting. He was at a unique point in history when he was able to take advantages of those things that occurred at the same time. Now there's, as I said, a website called the Weston A. Price Foundation, and as part of their website, they list, what do they call it? They call it Find Food / local chapters. And they have states, all 50 states in the United States. I believe it's all 50, but the states are listed. I'm in New York. You can go to New York. If you're in Colorado or Georgia or wherever you might be, click on that state, and there will be a list of the local chapters of the Weston A. Price Foundation. And within those local chapters, there will be email addresses of the people who run those local chapters. You can email those individuals. That's what I did here in New York. And they'll send you a list of the farms in your state, in your county, or within your region of the state, of farms that are organic farms that are raising animals the way I just suggested, without antibiotics, not on any CAFOs, using the proper feeding techniques for animals, raised in a humane way to help support regenerative farming on the earth. So anyways, look up the Weston A. Price Foundation. I've found that to be an excellent resource for finding foods that you're going to want to be eating. So when I talk about the regenerative farming of these animals. This is a very, very important point to make. What is regenerative farming? So when a rancher maintains the natural grasslands of the farm and puts ruminant animals like cows on those natural grasslands, there's a beautiful symbiotic relationship between the ruminant animal and the grasses. It's a beautiful ecosystem whereby the animal, the cow in this case, it provides the bacteria from its mouth. It provides the bacteria from its manure that nurture the grasses. It provides the enzymes from its saliva that nurtures the grasses. It provides the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the carbon, the potassium, the hydrogen that the grasses need to survive. So then the rain provides the water, and then the grasslands give back to the ruminant animal in the form of the grasses that the bacteria digest, which provides the protein and the fat. So as you can see, it's this beautiful symbiotic relationship. It doesn't require the addition of any fossil fuels. It doesn't require the addition of any fertilizers. It requires very, very little input from the rancher. The rancher is there to mostly facilitate efficient use of this symbiotic relationship. So regenerative farming pulls carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It sequesters carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere at a far greater rate than carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere from this biological ecosystem. And what that does is that helps to reduce the carbon footprint on the earth. We can look at evaluation analysis carbon models of these farms, and we can see farms on average take out somewhere between 3 and 5% more carbon from the atmosphere than they put into the atmosphere. So it's much, much less contribution to global warming in the form of carbon and carbon equivalents like methane, like nitrous oxide. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into other topics. And to wrap up our discussion on protein, just a reminder that we're purposely eliminating the protein that comes from grains, beans, and dairy because of the problems that those can cause for chronic disease. However, once we begin to heal, once we begin to recover from chronic illness, we may be able to add back certain forms of dairy, which could then be an additional form of protein for us. The easiest, most gentle way to add back dairy is in the form of fermented goat milk. And the reason for that is, first off, goat milk contains much less casein than cow's milk does. And secondly, when we ferment goat's milk, it removes most of the lactose. And both casein and lactose can create very sensitive inflammatory issues for people. So if you're going to ferment goat milk, this is a great book by William Davis. It's called Supergut. And he goes into various forms of goat milk yogurt. He goes into various forms of probiotics that we can use to make our own yogurts at home, our own kefir at home. He has 289 studies in here on the gut microbiome, on different types of microbes that can be used to get particular effects that we want in the body. So now we'll move into our discussion of fat and fat sources. As we talked about with proteins, proteins are broken down or they're made up of amino acids. Fats are broken down or they're made up of fatty acids. And these fatty acids are vital for the formation of cell membranes, mitochondrial membranes, for the formation of hormones. It also gives us a supply of cholesterol that's vital for our body. So very, very important to get the proper sources of fat. So what fats do I eat? Well, I get most of my fats from grass-fed cows, and that comes in the form of suet, comes in the form of tallow, and I actually buy a ball of suet. I get them in a 4-pack. It's fresh from the farm, and then I slice it into chunks that are big enough to put into a container, and then the rest I put into the freezer already sliced, so it's ready to go. Grass-fed butter or ghee. Ghee is a clarified butter. Those are also good sources of fat if you are trying to stick to grass-fed ruminant sources of fat. Your fat doesn't have to be from grass-fed ruminants. It could be from monogastric animals like pigs, like chickens. A really great way to get fats from chickens is to take a whole chicken, put it in a pot of water, and simmer it for about 2.5 hours. You might want to add some vegetables to that if you're eating vegetables. And then after it's done cooking, it'll start to fall apart. So then you take the chicken out of the water, pull off all the meat, put the meat back into the water, and now you have a soup. So you've got this beautiful broth, and when you put this broth in the refrigerator, it'll actually turn into this gelatinous material because there's so much fat in it. This is a great way to consume the fat sources, but also the collagen sources that come from the ligaments, the tendons of the chicken. Because you cooked it all whole, you've got this beautiful mixture of collagen, of fatty acids. So it's a great nutritional soup to have. You can also take the fat from the bacon grease after you've cooked your bacon and pour that into a small container, keep it in your refrigerator, and you can use that lard to cook with, whether you're cooking eggs or whether you're cooking a piece of meat or whatever that might be. And then omega-3 versions of fatty acids are very important for the brain. And probably the best source of omega-3 fatty acids would be seafood. That can be usually in the form of sardines or salmon for myself. It's very easy to get a can of salmon or a can of sardines, and comes in a can. You can take it with you traveling. It's very convenient. So in order to get the EPA and the DHA versions of omega-3 fatty acids, consider adding seafood, sardines, salmon particularly. Now the ALA version of omega-3 fatty acids, which is the form that comes from plant sources, for many people, they do not have the ability to convert ALA into the other forms of omega-3s. Some people can, but even if they can, it's usually only a small percentage of ALA that gets converted into DHA and EPA. So the best way, again, is to get your omega-3s from fish. And some people like to consume olive oil as part of their fatty acid profile. The olive oil is okay. The problem with any oils is that when they're exposed to light, they become oxidized. And it doesn't take long for these oils to basically become rancid. You won't taste it, but the chemical structure of these fatty acids, of these oils, will become altered. And it's not healthy for us. These oxidized oils can strip electrons from parts of our body that require electrons. So I just try to avoid oils. I much would prefer to consume my fats in the form of solid fats. And again, for me, that's suet, that's tallow, that's ghee and butter. Those are the forms that I prefer, along with my fish. Next on the list is fiber. Now, fiber is not necessary to consume, but some people like to consume some vegetables. They like to consume some fruits. We don't have to have fiber because we can do the same thing with collagen, with amino acids, and that is to feed the microbes of our gut microbiome. But if you want to have some vegetables, they do fit into a nutritionally therapeutic ketogenic diet. A small amount of fruit can fit into the therapeutic ketogenic diet as well. So what's the best way to consume vegetables? Well, the best way to consume vegetables is to ferment them. The process of fermenting is something that goes way, way back, thousands and thousands of years with our ancestral heritage, and they knew how to properly ferment foods, particularly vegetables, in order to reduce the toxicity that it has on our body. So if you want to consume some vegetables, consider fermentation. It's kind of fun to do at home if you want to learn how to ferment your own vegetables. I've done that from time to time, and it's a fun thing to do with children as well. But ferment vegetables. If you don't ferment vegetables, you can still consume a small amount of vegetables seasonally, and if you do it seasonally, which means probably during the summer months, then that gives your body 8 to 10 months to detoxify itself. So seasonal consumption of vegetables is a really safe way to do it if you're trying to avoid chronic disease. However, while you're initially healing from chronic disease, you may need to eliminate vegetables completely depending on your situation. Fruits, the best fruits to consume are berries because they're very low in sugar. Again, consuming those seasonally, the way our ancestors did, is the most natural way to consume them. So consider adding vegetables and fruits to your diet if you like the idea of having some fiber in your diet. Now, there's an issue that came up for me with regard to eating fruits and vegetables because we want to eat organic sources for health, but I found a personal conflict with organic sources. So if you recall from earlier in this video, I mentioned that for myself, when I construct my diet, I have three ideologies that are important for me. One is to create a healthy body, number two is to maintain a healthy planet, and number three is to manifest happy animals. Well, when you eat organic plants, the United States Department of Agriculture has a set of regulations, and those regulations say that in order for a farm to produce organic plants, in order to label it as certified organic, the farm cannot use any fossil fuel fertilizers. So instead, what they have to use is animal manure. And where do they get their animal manure? Well, they get their animal manure mostly from factory farms. And as I mentioned earlier, I do not like to support factory farms. Now you can look this up in the USDA regulations. It's section 205.203B, I believe. And then there's a section C that elaborates on that. And this explains that farms are not allowed to use fossil fuel fertilizers if they're going to label their products certified organic. Instead, they're going to be using mostly manure from factory farmed animals. So what I suggest that you do is call every farm from which you consume organic foods and specifically ask them where they get their manure. And if they get it from a CAFO, that may or may not have influence on your choices depending on your ideologies. So this now brings us to vitamins and minerals. Earlier in life, I consumed supplements to get my vitamins and minerals. But I've learned now that I can get those through eating whole foods. So I've already discussed the proteins, the fats, fiber maybe as an option for you. Now vitamins. Well, you're going to get most of the vitamins you need by consuming beef and the fats that we talked about. But to be sure you're getting everything that you need, I add a couple of things. So one of them is beef liver. So number one, if you want to make sure you're getting, particularly your fat-soluble vitamins, you can add some beef liver. Now, how much is the appropriate amount? Well, I like to look at it ancestrally. When our ancestors killed a large ruminant animal, they would share it amongst their family. And the liver was just a small part of the ruminant animal that they slaughtered. So they had to divide that liver up amongst all the members of their family who were consuming the rest of the animal. So that would probably be a fairly small amount of liver that they were getting. For myself personally, I eat about 1 cow per year, and that comes with 1 liver. So if I just take that liver and divide it over 52 weeks, that would show me how much that I should consume each week without getting too much. Because you can get too much, for example, vitamin A from eating too much liver. That's called vitaminosis A, hypervitaminosis. And we don't want to get too many vitamins because that can be a problem for our body as well. But it generally doesn't happen, but if you're concerned about it, then just limit your consumption. The next on the list, I would put egg yolks. Egg yolks are a great source of vitamins. We talked earlier about small fish like sardines. Again, those are a great source of vitamins and minerals, so keep those on your list as well. Electrolytes are really important to consume. The easiest way to do it is just add a good quality salt to all of your food. I like to use Redmond's salt. It's mined in Utah. You could also use Baja Gold salt. Both of those are very safe salts, very few contaminants, and they have minerals that come with the sodium chloride. So that's a good way to get your electrolytes. There are a few people who run into problems with electrolytes, and they may require the addition of potassium and magnesium. That's kind of rare, but if you find that you're having electrolyte problems when you get your electrolytes measured in your blood, or if you're getting leg cramps during the night, things like that, then you may want to talk to a functional medicine doctor about magnesium and potassium. Now there's 2 supplements that I do take in the actual form of a supplement. One of them is vitamin K complex. That includes vitamins K1 and K2 and the various forms of those. and number 2 is iodine. Now, vitamin K, most people are deficient in vitamin K. If you're eating a whole foods animal-based diet, you'll probably get most of the vitamin K that you need, especially K1. But I like to make sure that I get adequate amounts of K2. It's particularly important for the surface chemistry of LDL cholesterol particles. And it's also very important in the prevention of heart disease, I've found. So I supplement with that. And iodine I found to be very, very important. The biggest reason that iodine has become a problem in our society from the research that I've done is, first, it's not very well available in the foods that we eat. It's been highly depleted. And second is that our body absorbs and stores both fluoride and bromide. And when those are stored, they can displace iodine. They can attach to the iodine receptors in organs like, for example, our thyroid. And then we can become we can have hypothyroidism where our thyroid is not functioning properly. So if you add some iodine as a supplement, that will help to displace the bromide and fluoride from the stores of our body, and we can restore the natural balance that our body should have. Now, what's the right amount of iodine to consume? Well, there are labs and doctors who recommend very, very high amounts of iodine. I've done research on that, and it seems to be safe. They have done quite a bit of research and published many studies showing that 25 milligrams, 50 milligrams of iodine is shown to be safe, but I'm still very, very wary. I personally do 3 milligrams of iodine per day, which if you get the Lugol's form of iodine, the brand that I get is 3 drops. So 3 drops of Lugol's, I believe it's 2% iodine, gives me about 3 milligrams of iodine. So as we wrap up this discussion, let's remember that we are using food, we are using nutrition as a means to heal chronic disease. It's a minimalist, ancestral, evolutionary diet. And when we use it this way, it's basically an elimination diet. We're eliminating all the foods that cause us chronic disease. We're eating all the foods that help us to heal from chronic disease. So it's the best of both worlds. Now, I understand that it's very limiting. It may not be a lot of fun to eat, but you will get used to it. And honestly, I have no cravings for any foods other than what I eat, which is mostly grass-fed beef sources with the addition of some monogastrics, very, very minimal plants, if any. And you do get used to eating this way. You don't have any cravings. You don't even want any other types of food. So if you're struggling, if you are having a difficult time adapting to this, please reach out to me. Leave a comment in the comment section down below. I'll do everything I can to help coach you. And if I don't have the answers, I'll do everything I can to help get you the answers. So make use of that. I'm happy to do it. I enjoy doing it. And what I really want to do is help people to heal from chronic disease. So that's it for today. It'll take me a little while to work on the next video, but I hope to have that out in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, have a great day.